The next thing I'm going to show you is how to add fractions. I will show you two examples of how to add fractions with just proper fractions, and then I will show two examples of how to add fractions with mixed numbers. It is not any harder. So our steps are written. There are more steps this time. However, most of the steps are very minor. So the first thing I said is write the fraction vertically or up and down. That seems like a little step. However, it is important. It just helps aid with organization. Step 2 is find the common denominator using fancy M. Step 3 is make the fraction equal to the new denominator. A few of the students kind of get stuck at that point. It just takes a habit to get used to, and they'll see it's very easy. I did highlight bring the whole number with you because sometimes there's not a whole number, so you can't bring anything with you. The fourth step is what I call a thinking step. So the fourth step says think. What did I multiply by to get the new denominator? And then whatever you do to the bottom or whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the top or to the numerator. And then multiply the numerator by that same number. I'll show you that step. Now you need to do the exact same thing, so steps 4 and 5 for the second fraction. Add the whole numbers, if you have them. Add the numerators. The denominator always stays the same. And then fix any improper fractions. I call them bobbleheads sometimes. So fix any improper fractions or reduce. At this point, I have not taught reducing to the students at this point in the year. Some of the students are ready for it. However, later on in the year, when I do teach reducing, and if they refer back to this, they will know what reducing is. So I will show you a few examples. I am going to do them on a piece of paper as opposed to a slate, just because it is easier for me to work with using the lines. So two examples that we have that we can work with. I'm going to start with my fractions, my regular fractions, and I am going to have 2/5 plus 1/3. So step number 1 is write the fraction up and down. I always tell the students, I know that that seems like a baby step, but I promise it will help you. It just really aids that organization. Step number 2 is find a common denominator using the fancy M. If you have not watched my other video, you can watch my other video to see what is this fancy M. So I put my denominators on top. My denominators are the numbers on the bottom, so I put 5 and 3 on top. And I am going to keep going until I see a number that matches. So far, none of these numbers match. And this will also really help with multiplication facts as well. And I see that I have 15 as my common denominator. So step 3 is make the fractions equal to the new denominator. So I'm going to put my equal sign and put equal 15, equal 15. This is the part where it says to bring the whole number with you. I don't have a whole number in this problem, so I am fine. The next step is my thinking step. Think. What do you do to get the new denominator? So 5 times what will give me 15? Well, if you forget, you can look over here at your chart and see 5 times 3 is 15. Step number 5 says multiply the numerator by the same thing. So with fractions, whatever you do to that denominator, you need to do to the numerator, or vice versa. These are like a pair. So if I did 5 times 3 to get 15, I need to do 2 times 3 to get 6. Now this is my new fraction. Some of the students might want to cross off the old one. You can cover it up. Virtually, we are saying 2/5 is the exact same thing as 6/15. This would be like if you have pizza and you cut it into fifths or 15ths. If you ate 2 of these slices, it would be the exact same thing as eating 6. So I am going to cover that up because this fraction is no longer important. I only want the one that has the common denominator. So now step 6 says to multiply the second fraction, doing it the same way. So 3 times 5 is 15. So I need to do 1 times 5, and I get 5. once again, this fraction is no longer what we are working with. Now I can add these fractions because I have a common denominator. And it says to add the whole numbers. I don't have whole numbers, so I can go to my next step, add the numerators. 6 plus 5 is 11. The denominator stays the same. This is not an improper fraction, and I can also not reduce, so that is my answer. So 2/5 plus 1/3 equals 11/15. Let me show you another example. And this time I will come up with one that will have a improper fraction, or I call it a bobblehead. There's a funny story behind that one. So step number 1 is write the fraction vertically. Once again, this really aids with organization. Step number 2 is find your common denominator using the fancy M. Oh, that's times 1, this is times 2. So 8 times 2 is 16, 4 times 2 is 8, and I'm done right there actually. I am not going to go with 32 because 32 is a lot harder to work with. 8 is a pretty easy number to work with. So this is a prime example of when using the fancy M could benefit you versus just multiplying. So my common denominator is 8. So now step 3 is make the fraction equal to the new denominator. So I made it equal. Bring the whole number with you. I don't have any whole numbers. Think, what do I multiply by to get the new denominator? Well, 8 times 1 is 8. So whatever I do to the denominator, I need to do to the numerator. So 7 times 1 is 7. This is actually the exact same thing because my denominator is the same. However, I still am going to go ahead and cover that one up. Step number 5 says to multiply, step number 6, multiply the second fraction. So I need to now figure out what we have here. So 4 times 2 is 8. So 3 times 2 is 6. And I am adding 7 plus 6 is 13. And my denominator stays 8. So this is an improper fraction. I call it a bobblehead. The head is way too big for the body. I have shown the students a few different ways to work this out. Typically, we will use division, the arithmetic way. There are some other various ways, visual ways that I have shown the students. You can look in their math diaries to see other ways, but we need to divide because I cannot leave this. I always say my baby cannot live with its head too big for its body. So 8 can not go into 1, but 8 can go into 13 one time because 8 times 1 is 8. Subtract. 13 minus 8 is 5. My remainder is now my numerator and my denominator stays the same. So my answer is 1 5/8. There we are. So this is 2 ways of how to add fractions without mixed numbers. I will now show you 2 different ways to add numbers with mixed fractions, so that way you can kind of see the difference that we have going on here. So I am going to start off with, I'm going to do, let's say 6 2/3 plus 2 1/2. We'll just kind of keep them simple, easy numbers. The steps are the exact same. Write the fractions up and down. Find your common denominator.
Melissa Bensley, call the office. Melissa Bensley, call the office.
3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. I don't have a common denominator yet. 3 times 3 is 9. 2 times 3 is 6. There I go. So now I need to make my fraction equal the new denominator. Now this is when that step is important to know. So I wrote the numbers vertically. I found my common denominator. I made it equal. Now you have to remember to bring that whole number with you. So all you do is you really just bring it with you. You don't have to do anything fancy at all. Just bring it with you. Now I go back to my regular steps. So now I'm on step 4. Think, what do I multiply by to get the new denominator? Well, 3 times 2 is 6. So whatever I do to the bottom, do to the top. 2 times 2 is 4. And this is my new problem. So I'm going to cover up my old one just so I don't get myself confused. Students are more than welcome to cross it out, erase it. If they're using a slate, wipe it off. So now I need to think 2 times 3 is 6. So 1 times 3 is 3. Cover it up, and this is what I'm adding. Add my whole numbers. 6 plus 2 is 8. 4 plus 3 is 7 over 6. Now the students at this point in the year can leave it like this. However, students, if you are watching this and this is later in the year, we know that we cannot leave this improper fraction. We must fix it. Some of the students can fix it without doing this math. I get 1 and 1/6, but I have to remember that I have 8 over here, so 8 plus 1 is 9 and 1/6. This is a little bit more challenging. However, eventually later on in the year, the students will do this. Right now, it's November. We are just beginning to learn how to add fractions. So if the students can get to this part, they are doing very, very well. However, later on in the year, a lot of students will refer back to this video, even later on in the year. We know that we cannot keep it like this. So what I explain to the students is you have 8 full pizzas in the fridge. Keep them in the fridge. But now you have 7 pizza slices, and only 6 fit in a box. So when we divide, we find out, okay, I'm going to need another full box. So now I'm going to add that full box to my fridge. So now when I open up my fridge, I now actually have 9 full boxes of pizza, and I'll have 1 slice left over. So this is something that we will do later on in the year. However, I did want to show the students how to do that because we will be doing that later on in the year. And let's look at another adding fractions problem with mixed numbers. All right, let's try. Let's do 3 and 1, or we'll do 3 and, we'll do 3 and 1/6 plus 2 and 2/3. We'll see what we get with this one. Done a lot of 3s today. All right, so I need to write the fraction up and down. Find my common denominator, and some of the students will begin to be able to see that common denominator without figuring out the fancy M way, which is great. And my common denominator is 6. I personally don't want to use 18 because that would be harder. So make your fraction equal to the new denominator. Don't forget your whole numbers, and this time we have it. Now I need to think 6 times 1 is 6. So whatever you do to the bottom, do to the top. This fraction ends up being the exact same. Down here, I have to do 3 times 2, which is 6. So I do 2 times 2, which is 4. Cover it up because I'm now done. Yes, my denominators are the same. I have fixed it all up. 3 plus 2 is 5. 1 plus 4 is 5, and my denominators stay the same. This is not an improper fraction. This is a good fraction, so I am done there. And that is how you can add fractions.